Best known as Fiery Fred, Fred Trueman. Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Steve. How are you?
Very well, thank you. A glittering cricket career, but it could have been so different, couldn't it? You could have ended up bricklaying.
Well, yes, of course I could. I intended to take up an apprenticeship to be a bricklayer because my father always said that you must learn a trade. And a trade, of course, in those days was known as like bricklaying, joiner, electrician, plumber or whatever. And if you had a trade, you could always get a job.
Unfortunately, the bricklaying thing didn't quite take off. There was a chap there who didn't like you much, did he?
Oh, there's one or two people didn't like me. I think it was because, you see, I was playing cricket at a very early age. When you thought about an apprenticeship of 17 and sixpence a week in those days, and I could make £6 playing cricket on a Saturday afternoon. Of course, if I did well and got a collection, I'd sometimes bring home £15, £20, which today people might laugh, but that was, talking 1947, 48, that was a lot of money.
And the bricklaying came to an end when you told one of the bosses there where he could stick it, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. There was two of us. They expected me to be loading the barrow and wheeling it as well while the other bloke stood still, and so I was standing still and let him load the barrow, and he come round and said something to me, so I told him what I thought. I've been like that all my life, I'm sorry.
You'd been playing cricket already by then, hadn't you? You were doing the two together.
I was playing at Sheffield United in those days under the guidance of a most wonderful man called Cyril Turner. Cyril played for Yorkshire as an all-rounder before the war and just after, and he came to Bramhall Lane as the cricket coach and professional, and he played with Sheffield United, and of course he found me playing at Erringthorpe Valley playing fields.
And then you got selected and you were packed off to Brighton on a tour, weren't you?
No, I was chosen for the Yorkshire under-18s. And that's where, of course, I met Brian Close and Ray Illingworth, who were, along with myself, to play a very prominent part in the victorious Yorkshire side of the late 50s and 60s.
Now, what's your early memories of Ray? I gather he wasn't a very good traveller, was he?
No. You used to put him at the front of the bus so we could hang him out the window to be sick. And he was always like, all his life, he was the same. If he was a passenger in the car, he just used to be so sick. And no matter what you did for him, no matter what tablets you gave him, it didn't work. But he got through it somehow.
Not great, though, if you're a travelling cricketer with overseas tours and everything.
Well, I don't think he was too bad in the air and on the sea. He seemed to be in a motor car or a vehicle. We used to sit and laugh. He used to say, open the window and stick his head out. And, oh, yeah, all the time. But he was still a fine cricketer.
So eventually you started playing for Yorkshire. Obviously, when a cricketer starts, one of the main aspirations is to get your county cap. You almost had to end up asking for yours, didn't you?
Well, not really, no. It was a year or two in coming. Brian Close got his county cap in his first season because if anybody was born to be a brilliant cricketer, it was Brian Close. He had everything. He could bowl medium, fast, beautiful action, make the ball swing away from the right-handed batsman. Then people mess him about a bit by trying to get him to bowl off-spinners, which we didn't agree with. His batting never fulfilled the great promise that he had. I mean, he should have been the equivalent to Gary Sobers. Of that, there is no doubt. He had just as much talent as Garfield Sobers, if not more. We used to call him Sterling Moss. Because he was always somewhere in a car accident. It was unbelievable. You could do a whole programme on Brian Close's driving experiences. It was unbelievable, the things that used to happen to Brian Close in a motor car.
So when Brian offered you a lift, you said, I think I'll walk.
When Brian offered you a lift, you had other things to do, because Brian, God bless him, super guy. Very generous sort of man to a fault, basically. But I always thought that Brian Close was one of those sort of people that he didn't drive a car, he aimed it. And sometimes it wasn't the best.
So you're playing for Yorkshire at the time. Then there was the National Service that came up. Was that a hard decision to make or not?
Well, no, it wasn't a decision at all. The decision was made for me. I was playing at Yorkshire, playing against Essex, actually, at Bradford. And I was told I was awarded my county cap on the same day as the great bowler Bob Appleyard. And we were given our county caps in the committee room at Bradford. And there's another story about that cap, because when I was awarded my cap, somebody said, well, why is he getting his cap now? I thought he had his cap. And evidently I should have been capped 2 or 3 weeks earlier. And the cap was in the secretary's drawer and hadn't been presented to me. So the RAF recruiting officer was at the ground and he knew I'd been capped. So now, you see, I've become a full-time professional. And so the reserved occupation didn't come into it anymore. And I went into the recruiting office at Bradford and I did the acceptance exams. When it came to the colourblind test, I tried to fake it because I wanted to play cricket and that was and then he said no, come off it, he said, because he said I saw you take a couple of catches, leg slips, so there's nothing wrong with your eyes, he said. But anyway, I finished the cricket season with Yorkshire. Then I was accepted into the Royal Air Force, and in the finish, the 2 years I spent in Her Majesty's Forces were 2 marvellous years, actually.
You were an instant success, really, with Yorkshire, weren't you? There wasn't a major apprenticeship there. You just started taking wickets. Simple as that.
Yes, I did. In my first Test match, a man called Ellis Robinson came from South Yorkshire, fine off-spin bowler. Well, should have played for England. But in my first match, after a few overs, a man called Morris was the opening batsman for Cambridge University in my first ever game. And Ellis said to me, can you bowl a bouncer? So I said, yeah. He said, well, let this man have one, he said, because, you know, he's playing forward. And I did. I ran up next ball and bowled a bouncer. And he went to defend himself, hit him on the glove, and Ellis Robinson actually caught it. And the buzz that went round the ground, because I think it was the first genuine bouncer they'd seen from an English bowler since the days of Ken Farnd or something before the war. I know there was something written in one of the local newspapers to say, and we actually saw a bouncer from a Yorkshire fast bowler.
Then the call-up from England wasn't too far behind, was it?
No.
You didn't believe that, did you?
No. First of all, I played in the Test trial in 1950, once again at Bradford, and I was walking down the road and one of the local lads said, congratulations. So I said, why? What's congratulations for? He said, well, haven't you heard the news? He said, you're in the Test trial at Bradford. And of course, that was that most famous game where Jim Laker took 8 for 2. And I got one of the runs. So some Test trial that was. I think they're all out for about 26 or 27 or something. And Jim, got 8 wickets. So I was starting to spring to prominence. And in that match, of course, there was 2 things happened. I clean bowled Len Hutton, who was later, of course, my idol, greatest batsman I ever saw. And I actually caught Norman Yardley off... I don't know who was the bowler, it might have been Eric Bedts or something like that. I caught Norman Yardley mid-off. So in that game, the 3 Yorkshiremen playing, and I helped to dismiss 2 of them. And I was out to one of the most brilliant piece of stumpings that you would ever see, or ever likely to see, by Godfrey Evans. Alec Bedts ran up the bowl from the pavilion end, and he swung the ball back, and it went between my bat and pad down the leg side, and Godfrey took the bails off, and I was out stumped, which was absolutely unbelievable, because he must have been blinded by my feet and pads and things, but yet still take the ball so superbly and whip the bails off. Not knowing, of course, that just up the road they were going to play a great part in my international career, because 1951 came, I played my first full season, got 90-odd wickets, and then 1952, I found myself in the Test team. And 1952 will go down as one of, in my own mind, as one of my best ever seasons, because I only played in 9 first-class games, played 4 for England against India, and 5 county games, 2 of them which were against Lancashire. In those 9 games I got something like 67 wickets, which when you're talking about nearly 8 wickets a game, that's I was going well. Mind you, I was bowling at my quickest then, still being able to swing the ball. And of course, in my first season in Test cricket, I played against India, and I had a tremendous series because I took 29 wickets in the 4 games. There wasn't 5 games, else I might have been the first man in history to have taken 30 wickets in his first series. And I probably would have still got 30 wickets if it hadn't have been for, we didn't have a second innings because it rained. And I had 29 then. And of course, along the road we set all sorts of records in that. In the first Test at Leeds, 4 for none. Then I got 8 for 31 against them at Old Trafford. Then in the Test match at the Oval, I think there was something like 6 for 5 in the first innings. It was a meteoric rise up the ladder, if you like. You know, when you think you're a third of the way to 100 Test wickets in only 4 games.
Now, you came back from the West Indies, 53-54. That's where you started to get your nickname of Fiery Fred, and the press used to make up stories, find stories. Tell us a few of the stories then that were circulating.
Well, first of all, they had a letter barring me from a hotel in Bristol. And I was dragged before the county committee to explain my behaviour, playing dominoes, singing and demanding drinks at 12 o'clock at night. And as I said to the committee, if I could sing, I wouldn't be bothered to play cricket. After it all died down in the meeting, and I said, well, wait a minute, you know, I might be a good cricketer, I don't know, but I can't play in 2 games at the same time. Whereupon they said, what do you mean you can't play in 2 games at the same time? I said, well, when the incident was taking place at Bristol, I wasn't even there. And if we had a proper secretary, I said, I said, he would have known that and I wouldn't be in here. Whereupon the chairman of the club turned and said, how dare you, he said, say anything about our secretary, the best secretary in the country, you know. And I said, well, not this time. Our president then was a gentleman called Sir William Worsley. Wonderful, wonderful man. He said, just calm down, calm down. What do you mean, Freddie? I said, well, Sir William, I was playing for England against the West Indies at Lord's. And he said, well, I spoke to you a lot. I said, yes, you were there, sir. And he said, well, you couldn't have been at Bristol. I said, well, that's what I'm trying to say. I wasn't at Bristol. I wasn't even in the team. Of course, that upset the old amateurs on the Yorkshire County Committee that they'd once again failed to nail me. But I'm still waiting for an apology from the County Committee, and I'm talking 38 years later. They wouldn't even let me have the letter so I could sue the hotel, because I wasn't there. Yeah. But anybody with black hair to do with the cricket team, especially around Yorkshire, England, was me. No matter what. There was an incident took place in the West Indies, and Leonard came to me and Tony Locke and said he'd got this complaint from this woman, some MCC member's wife. What it had to do with MCC, I don't know. And of course I used to get in trouble because I called them the Marylebone Calypso Club. Anyway, Tony Locke and I apologised to this woman for the behaviour the night before, and I said, well, I'm not apologising, I've done nothing wrong. And Tony Locke said, well, what have I done? You know. So in the finish, Leonard said, look, can we have this? So Tony Locke and I went and said to this woman how sorry we were for the incident that took place, you see. And she accepted that. And Leonard thanked us for it, and I said, thank us. I said, it's not bad for something we've never done. And of course, it turned out that this woman was in a lift. She was an elderly lady, and I think she wanted to go up, and they wanted to go down or something. Whatever the incident was, I don't know. And it turned out, you know, it was 2 other people, but one had black hair, so that was enough. I don't know. Another one, a hotel where I'd been causing trouble. I wasn't even booked in. I wasn't even staying there. I was staying at home. I used to be blamed for things. And, it was that Trueman, you know, and all that. And things like, he's a regular caller here, where I'd never been. Yeah. Well, it's still to this day. It happens. You say, oh, you were so-so, and I'd say, no, I wasn't. It's only about 18 months ago. I upset somebody up in the Dales here, you know. I got to the point where I had to count 10, actually, because I'd cracked him one. He said, oh, when I used to come into your pub and you used to pull a pint from me, and I said, hang on a minute, I've never had a pub. And he said, well, you so-and-so liar. I said, if you ever call me a liar again, I said, you'll be in very serious trouble. And while I was counting to 10, I'd like everybody to know, I've never owned a pub. No. I've never wanted to own one. And I very rarely go in them, although I'm told I'm seen in them all the time, you know. I mean, if breweries relied on people like me for their profits, they'd be skint. They'd have to go out of practice. And I've often said, when I die, I ought to leave my body to science, really, because they ought to be able to find out why I was so successful and the way I supposedly lived. Mm. You see, I've slept with every woman in the world. Yep. I've drank more beer than has ever been brewed. And then on the top of that, I still came out with more wickets than any fast bowler in the history of the game. Not just in my career, in the history of the game. I mean, how long have I been playing cricket? Nearly 200 years. Yeah. So when you think about, you know, what I did, drinking, womanising, never going to bed, it's been one hell of a career, hasn't it? to think that I never slept. It is unbelievable. The achievements under the circumstances in which they were supposedly achieved.
The debates in cricket have gone on for a long time. The things that you see complained about today, umpires' decisions, they've been going on since the beginning of time. 1958 tour in Australia. You felt you had a real bad rub of the green with the umpires that tour, didn't you?
Oh, the umpires were unbelievable. 58-9. Well, the thing was, you see, Steve, that Australian cricket had peaked and gone. You know, your Lindwalls, your Millers, all these wonderful, these great players, they'd all passed, and Australian cricket was going through a very rough period at the time. The crowds weren't as big as they ought to have been, and it was a case of, if we can win the series against England, you know, and we can regenerate the game in Australia, that's the way I looked at it. And I remember playing in Western Australia, a fellow called Slater bowled off spinners, but somebody broke down, so he opened with a new ball in the second innings, and there's no doubt about it, you know, his action was very suspect. And I know that they went to see the Australian authorities and said, this man's throwing it, and the chairman of the club said, yeah, but he's throwing it straight. And that was the end of that. But some of the decisions we got, they were unbelievable. And Australia, of course, went on to win the series. But some of the decisions that came our way, well, they're best forgotten, not talked about.
But some of the decisions actually even embarrassed the Australians, didn't they? Didn't you get your easiest Test wicket ever at that point by one of the Australian players saying, well, look, you know, I feel bad about this as well. Chuck us a straight one and I'll...
Oh, that was the run out at Adelaide.
Yeah.
I mean, it was unbelievable. The umpire wasn't even looking. He was on the wrong side of the wicket for a start. One of the batsmen had a runner because he was injured, and the runner ran in behind him. And, you know, he was looking somewhere else altogether and gave it not out. And I think it was Colin MacDonald. He said, this is getting embarrassing, he said. And he took a swing at me, and I hit the stumps, and that was that. But I've had other decisions. I remember, I cannot believe it, but I was batting in Trinidad, and I was about 29 not out, and a fellow called Frank King bowled one. He bowled a little bit on the short, and I played back, and I missed the ball, and it hit me somewhere between the left breast and my waistband. And somebody appealed for LBW, and he gave me out. I came in, I could not believe it. The red mark where it hit me on the left-hand side of the tummy. I mean, OK, I'm not the tallest man in the world, but even playing back and standing up, I was still 5'11", and the ball, and you had to see it to believe it. You had to see it to believe it. There was one umpire, his name was Jordan, I think, and he umpired in sunglasses, and he gave somebody not out. I forget who was bowling, but he gave somebody not out, and the bowler turned round and said, you know, he said, I only know two people play cricket in sunglasses, and the fella said, oh, who's the other one? He said, the Duke of Edinburgh. Oh, yeah. Another time in the West Indies, we were touring, and I think David Allen was bowling, and certainly, yeah, it was David from Gloucestershire, and David drew Rowan Canny out, and Roy Sweatman stumped him, and I was standing just behind square, and the umpire was only about 2 yards away on my left. Roy Sweatman stumped him beautifully, and the umpire said not out, and Roy pulled the stump out of the ground with the ball in his hand. He was still a foot out of his hand, and appealed again. I said, come on. I said, he's still out of his ground, and he still said not out. We couldn't believe, because we were beating them all ends up. We were going to do them, but in the finish, of course, with some of these bad decisions, they managed to hang on for a draw with 8 wickets down. You know, I remember another time, my great old pal, God bless him, Brian Statham, and he nipped one back off the seam, and he hit the batsman just above the ankle, bang in front. And we all appealed for LBW, not out, says the umpire. We couldn't believe, I mean, we just stood there, we couldn't believe what we were watching. And I think it was Jeff Puller. And as he passed the umpire, he said to him at the end of the over, he said, what was the matter with the LBW? Was it going under? And he said, yeah. And I'm not joking. There was another time, and I was playing in the West Indies again, and I think it was Easton McMorris was the batsman. And I think it was the last ball before lunch. I dug one in at him, and he defended himself. Hit him on the glove, and Mike Smith caught the ball to the back pad, short leg business, you know, and all that business. And he just stood there. So eventually we turned the umpire and he said, not out, and took the bails off and went for lunch. And after lunch, their captain, a fellow called Jerry Alexandra, said to Peter May, would it be all right if Rowan Canny came in at number 3? So Peter May said, why, what's the matter? Who is it? And he said, it's Easton McMorris. He said, what's my... He said, he's gone to hospital, have his hand x-rayed where Freddie hit him. And anyway, he got back in time, and he came out to continue his, and fortunately it wasn't broken. I thought, well, I'll go after him. With Brian Statham and myself, when we played, if you upset him, you upset me. And if you upset me, you upset him. So it was no use saying I'll get down the other end, because there was no hiding place.
No.
And even Frank Tyson with us as well. So, whichever end you went to, you could be in trouble. And that's how we worked as a pair, you see. But, we had some great fun. I remember British Guyana we were playing, and we had a good night on the Saturday night, and Brian and I shared bedrooms, and I went, and I was talking to somebody, and he said, I'm going to bed. I said, yeah, all right. It must have been 12:30, 1 o'clock, I don't know. I said, yeah, I'm coming up, yeah, go. So anyway, whoever I was talking to, after about a quarter of an hour, I said, I'm going to bed. And I went upstairs, and I went into the bedroom, and he turned the air conditioning up. It was like walking into a butcher's fridge. Cold, and he was lying on the bed, starkers, passed out, and he was going blue. And I got the air conditioning, turned it down to something like modest, Then I went to cover him up, and he took a swing at me. And I said to him, if you ever do that again, I said, I'll break your neck. And anyway, I got him covered up, and he didn't know, but next day, I said to him, you took a swing at me last night. He said, oh, I'm sorry. And he said the kind of thing. Anyway, we sat talking. And Brian said, well, I think we better have a bit of breakfast, haven't we? I said, yeah, we pulled the curtains back. It was dark. We sat talking all day. So we went down, we got some dinner, and he said, what are we going to do? And I said, there was a Western film on a cowboy. So I said, right, come on then, and we'll go to this film. So Tommy Greenhoff and Jeff Buller said, oh, yeah. So can we come with you? So we said, yeah, of course. And so we went to the cinema and upstairs in the balcony and to watch this thing. And we used to fall about laughing because, when the good guy and the bad guy sneaking up, and all they were standing up, the West Indians on the front shouting, behind you, Well, we were falling about in the balcony, you couldn't believe it. Anyway, the girl came round with a tray with the drinks and things on, ice cream and chocolates and things, and Brian just said to her, he said, no thank you, love. He said, rather have 4 lagers. And she just laughed, and went. Anyway, she came back about 10 minutes later with 4 lagers, and Brian said same again. He said, in 10 minutes. Oh, that's the fun we used to have. Great friendship, and friendships that have gone on throughout our lives. Oh, we had some great times. Absolutely, and of course, not many people know. Brian was double jointed, and he could do things with his arms and that nobody else could do. Like he'd just put his arm down his back and pull his sweater off, and people used to look. And he'd put his arm around and tickle his ear on the other side. And he could be very entertaining, and a super lad. Thought the absolute world of him. We remained great friends throughout our lives until the end of his life, of course. Still talk about him because that's how great the friendship was. And no doubt it'll be talked about as one of the great partnerships for many, many years to come.
That 58 tour of Australia, you made quite a few friends there. You made quite a few friends on the hill, which is not the easiest place to make friends, is it, in Sydney? I mean, they're a slightly volatile lot, but you ended up having a drink with them, didn't you, while you were playing? What happened there?
I had a sip. No, what was happening was, Australians love the cricket and they're like entertainers. And they've got great respect for great players. Don't make any mistake about it. And they always want to have a bit of fun with you and all that business. There was one bloke who used to sit on the hill, I think they called him Leathergut, and he was always having a go. Anybody and anything, really. But he wasn't spiteful in any way. In fact, sometimes he was very funny in some of his remarks. And Frank Tyson bowled a fellow called Jimmy Burke. And Jimmy did a bit of... he used to play the piano and things. Tell a few stories, sing a song or two. Nice man. And he was playing and missing at Frank Tyson. And he shouted right across the ground when it was quiet, bowl him a piano, see if he can play that, he said. And everybody fell about laughing. And then a bit later on, Frank was bowled, of course. And a bit later on, he shouted across to Frank Tyson, say, Tyson, he said, do you part your hair in a circle? This was all going on. Anyway, I've got a couple of wickets and things like that, and they're giving me applause, and suddenly one of them said, "Have a beer, Freddie," and I said, "Not while I'm playing," kind of thing. So I said to, I think it might have been Peter May, and I said, "They want me to have a drink down the hill, brother," and he said, "We'll just have a bit of fun, have a sip," which I did. When I said, "Yeah, come in," and gave me in, and I said, "Oh," great big roar went up, crowd and all. And anyway, at the end of the next over went down, there was beer right down the fence, all the way down the hill, which was absolutely marvellous, And I stood, and I clapped them and applauded them, and they thought it was marvellous. Yeah.
Let's move on a few years to 62. Now, you're on the ship out to Australia. You're thinking, I know, we'll have a nice relaxing few days before we get there. I'm going to bring a name back from your past, Gordon Pirrie, who ran for England in the Olympics. And there was this great idea from the England management to have him do you a bit of training, wasn't there?
That's
on
right.
board. You didn't take kindly to that, did you?
I didn't take kindly to it at all. And on the top of that, there was no way I was going to do it. The last thing you want to be doing is running around the ship's decks on hard boards. I mean, that does your calves and your thighs a tremendous amount of good in your knees. And I wount do it. And I set up one day and I nipped through the doors, came out the other side, and that was it. I know Gordon Pirrie said something to me about running and all that, and he was talking about the Olympics in Melbourne, 56, I think. And I said, "Oh, I remember it quite well." I said, "Zatopek had just finished his lap of honour when you came through." And so that upset him. I know.
He had some ideas on diet as well, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Shouldn't eat steak. And I said to him, he said, "I've got a friend of mine," he said, 90-odd years of age, he said, "I've never eaten a steak," he said, and he still chases reindeer. And then I said, "Well, he can get on with chasing reindeers because I'm not going to bother." When you just bowled 1,000 overs, I would have been on holiday in England, having a couple of weeks' holiday with my wife and kids somewhere, and resting over the rigours of the season. Not to go straight into full training again. And the idea of going by boat was to relax after a hard, long season. When you'd bowled April, May, June, July, August, September, in the nets and things, all that kind of business, and your practice sessions and that, and your benefit games, you probably, at the end of that season, bowled 1,200 overs. And, somewhere along the line, you had to put your feet up somewhere. And on the boats, of course, was the idea of relaxing, resting, and getting to know your teammates. Because there'd always be 3 or 4 on a tour that you didn't specifically know well. And so you used to and get together and talk and get to know their temperament, get to know what they liked, what they didn't like, and in all, you were moulding a team spirit, because that's what you were going out as. You were going out as a team to play cricket. And sometimes I do get upset. Even now I get upset when people hear commentators and things saying, "Well, you'd thought it had declared by now," and and all this business. But what you've got to try to remember, Steve, is that when you are on tour and you're playing a series of test matches, you have gone to win a series. You haven't gone to win a specific test match. At the end of the series, if you've won one and they've won none, you have won the series. And that is why it is so important to try to win the first test match, or to be in the lead. And this is what you can't get through to people. You play to win a series, not a test match. There's 5 of them. Well, nowadays there's 6 or 7. There's more test matches now than there is Coronation Street. Is that regular? Well, I mean, they've turned Test cricket from a skill into a circus. That's what they've done. Sometimes I despair, but I still like watching my cricket. Of course I do.
A lot of the changes in cricket you haven't agreed with. One development that you did certainly was the finishing of amateurs and professionals, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, what did it mean to be an amateur and a professional back in the 40s and 50s? What were the differences?
Well, privileges for a start, and we would stay in a 17 and sixpence pound bed and breakfast. Now they'd probably be loading it in the big hotels where all expenses paid. Them and their wives would be invited into committee rooms for lunch or tea or anything like that. Our wives wasn't. It wasn't as bad in the 40s and 50s. It must have been in the 20s and 30s. I mean, before the war, the way I heard some of them old amateurs speak to professionals, well, I wouldn't have played cricket because I'd have hung one on for certain, and I wouldn't have been on my own. Don't get me wrong with amateurs, because there were a lot of fine amateurs. In the Yorkshire side, we had people like Norman Yardley, Geoffrey Keithley, Don Brennan, who were great guys, wonderful people, and a lot of the time on the trains travelled with us, because the amateurs could drive a motor car to away matches, but the professional couldn't. And of course, they'd travel first class on the train if they wanted to, and we'd travel third class. But our amateurs would always travel with us. They wouldn't go...
So it wasn't the individuals, it was more what amateurism represented, really.
Well, that's right, yeah. But there were some teams that the captain stayed at a different hotel to the players. Well, that's breeding team spirit, isn't it? If you want. But Billy Sutcliffe was an amateur as well. He was a good lad. He always travelled with us, and he always stayed with us. He demanded that. But there were some who took it to the full extent. And of course, you see, I got into trouble with someone because I was a great reader of cricket history, statistics and stories and all that kind of thing. I've always been interested in that side of thing. And when you look at some of their performances, how they played so many times for England, or even played county cricket, you said to yourself, hang on a minute, you know, there's something funny here. I mean, how do you play 30 times for England and get 78 wickets and you're a leading, which has happened? Well, I mean, you look and you think, what's going off? You know, because as a professional, you wouldn't have played 30 times for 80 wickets. Make no mistake about it, you wouldn't have been in the side. But they did, and they went on tours. I mean, you know, there was one on tour somewhere, we went somewhere, and I said to the management, I said, what are we doing? Picking this bloke on the tour? I said, he can't play. They said, no, but he's a nice fella. I thought, well, as some of my mates were laughing, we're going to be plodding away, hammering away on the cricket field, they'll be down on the beach listening to the radio. And it's true, yeah. And so I did. I got into trouble because I voiced my opinion, and what's more, I meant it, because you're supposed to be the best. You're the cream. You're in a privileged position. You're playing and representing your country, and you can have knighthoods, OBs, CBs, you can have all them, but the highest honour that you can have bestowed upon you is to represent your country. You can't get any bigger. No way. When you go out there to play for England, in my day when I played, there'd be what? Probably 50 million, 45 million people in this country in those days, and there's only 11, and you're one of those 11. Ho, ho, ho. 3 lines and a crown on your chest, or St. George and the Dragon on your blazer. No, can't get any bigger than that. No way. That's the highest honour you can have. It's the proudest moment of your life, is when you pull on an England sweater, apart from if you're a Yorkshireman like me and you pull on a Yorkshire sweater as well. But that is the proudest moment of your life. It is the pinnacle of your career. So if you go on and play 100 times for England, wow, marvellous, absolutely wonderful. It had been very difficult in my days to have played 100 times for England because there were so many wonderful players around. And if you happen to get an injury or get dropped, it'd have to be hard work to get back in, because there was always a few around. You see, when you look at today what we've got, okay, good luck to them. But when I was playing, you had Bedser Bailey, Tyson, Statham, Jackson, Gladwin, Loader, Moss, Favell, Trueman. 10. And there's only place for 3, and one of them had already gone because Trevor Bailey was the all-rounder. I mean, Trevor Bailey, one of the finest cricketers this country's ever produced. Make no mistake about that. So there was two places out of 9, and that's how hard it was to get into, as a fast bowler, to be consistently recognised, to be there all the time. You had to be on your toes because the competition was so intense. There was always somebody waiting to take your place, which was as good as you, or practically as good, whichever way you want to look at it. It was hard work to play 100 test matches. You see, when I became the first man in history to get 300 wickets, they thought it would never be beaten. But now, of course, people are playing 100 test matches. I played for England, my last test match, I'd be 34. I mean, they're playing now till they're 38 and 39 years of age as fast bowling. You couldn't have done it when I played because you wouldn't have been good enough. No. First of all, you wouldn't have had the pace. And secondly, there was so many good youngsters coming up. But we're in that position now. We've got about, in England at the present moment, we've got probably 4 bowlers you can say, well, yeah, test class. You haven't got any more. And spin bowlers, well, they're non-existent. Although the best spin bowler in the world, a fellow called Tufnell, he's not in the side, of course. He's probably upset somebody as well. So it still goes on. You know, I mean, amateurism in county cricket or in the game of cricket, it's only like prostitution. It's only been shoved under the carpet. That's all. It's still there and always will be. You know, you only got to look at committees and county sides. There'll be somewhere in the background, there'll be public school or university. People think I'm going about public school and I'm anti-public school and university, which I'm not, of course. But I am against some of the privileges that's still afforded to these people that aren't afforded to the old professionals. Lots of old professionals out there, wonderful guys, you know, and living on old age pension as well. There's no money when they played, you see. There's a lot of them out there still in rented accommodation and things, which when you've been an international sportsman, that shouldn't be the case. They should be looked after, and they're not. And I've tried different ideas. I put this to them and put that, and nothing's become of them. Is because I'd thought of it, not them, possibly. They say, well, it's Freddie Trueman's idea. Well, that's no good, you see, because you want somebody to have thought of that with university or public school, because the CBE might be going there, you see.
Your quest for 300 Test wickets was quite long and protracted. You got about 297, 298, and then there was a little period where it looked as though you might not get another Test to do it.
Oh, yeah, there certainly was. They did me a great favour, actually, because they thought they had better bowlers, you see, and I was on 297, and they dropped me for the Test match at Old Trafford. They got a nice warning there, didn't they? Bobby Simpson got 300. I think Brian Booth got 90 odd. I think Bill Lawrie probably got 100. I know Australia scored many hundred runs, and they found out on a good wicket that they couldn't bowl them out. I'm not sure, but I think Ken Barrington got 250. See, there was a fine player, far better player than people ever gave him credit for. Wonderful player, averaged 50 odd in Test cricket. So it didn't take him long to bring him back at the Oval. And of course it happened, didn't it? And I got a wicket, and then I had a couple of catches dropped and things like that. And then there seemed to be looking round for another ball, and I took the ball out of Ted Dexter's hand, and I put myself on the pavilion end. I said, I'll bowl. And I think he was thinking about putting Peter Parfitt on, my great pal. I said, I'll bowl. And of course I did, and I knocked Ian Redpath's off stump over. Then Graham Mackenzie came in, he nicked the ball to slip. You know, it's sad, the names I mentioned, a lot of the names I mentioned, they've passed on. And I'm still here, God's good. But my great mate, Neil Hawke, coming down the steps, and of course they let him go down the steps. They didn't tell him that they were coming off it with lunch. You see, poor old Neil, he's about halfway down the steps when he sees everybody coming up. And he said to me, you know, he said, well, if you're going to get 300 Test wickets, mate, I hope it's me, he said, because that is the only way they'll remember me, he said. And ironically, that's what happened.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah, I sat in the dressing room, had a cup of tea and a sandwich, and contrary to what people think about drinking at lunchtime, anyway, I bowled the first ball after lunch. I was on a hat-trick. Now, that's another thing that gets me, you see, because when I took my 300th Test wicket, according to the people that were there must have been 250,000 in that ground. I'm not joking. Everybody, I was there when it happened, and I thought, well, that's funny. The ground did start to fill up at lunchtime.
Yeah.
There's no arguing about that, because they sensed that there might be a piece of history. You could see them coming into the ground visually, you know. There was no doubt about it, the crowd swelled. And I went out after lunch on the hat-trick, didn't bowl it straight enough outside the off stump. And then eventually the new ball was due, and I got the new ball, and it happened. And Neil Hawke edged me to Colin Cowdrey, who caught it at first slip. And the 300th was there. And as I say, you know, the crowd stood up and watched and all that, absolutely marvellous. Peter Parfitt caught the 301. And people said, what were you thinking at the time? I said, well, there's another wicket, I wanted that.
Yeah.
I don't think they believed me,
No.
but I did, you know. And I finished up with 4. And of course I was applauded off the ground, and it was a great moment. It was a wonderful feeling. And of course the other thing, of course, my dad was sat in the crowd, and he definitely was there, and my mother was watching it on television. So I was very pleased that my dad was there to see it. Of course, the family and celebrations and things. But that was another thing, you see. I actually went down into the umpires' changing room, and that dear man, Sid Buller. And I said to Sid, have you got the ball, Matthew, in the test wicket? And he said, yes. I said, well, I'd like it, you see. And he said, I was hoping I could keep that. He said, but it's yours. And he gave it me, Sid. There was nothing from English authorities or anything like that where you thought they would have taken the ball away and got it mounted and made a presentation. Oh, it was nothing like that. And I did it myself and paid for it myself. I do believe if I'd have been the university, and I think there's something would have been made of it. In fact, I'm nearly sure there would. People don't realise, never will realise, it's gone, and thank God for that. Although sometimes I think there might be more respect for the good amateur player. But don't forget there were people playing who should have been in the side. But you had great respect for the good amateur cricketer, and we'll never see the likes of it again, of course. But there were some that used the position, and they thought they could bully one or two people. And it did used to be, and they'd say to you, you naughty boy, you know, and you'd say, hang on a minute, I'm married with 2 kids, what's this naughty boy business? And it's true. I used to laugh in the faces, me. A lot of them didn't say too much to me, you see, because I had a ball in my hand, I could get my own back. I could bowl bounces, and I could bowl quite quickly. That other great dear old friend of mine, Ray Lindwall, and he said, Freddie, a fast bowler has an advantage. And I said, what's that, Ray? He said, you see, he said, if you want to put the wind up somebody, frighten them a bit, he said, you go through the front line about a yard, he said, before you deliver. I said, well, that's a no ball. He said, yeah, but the umpire can't grab you by the breeches backside and pull you back. He said, he can only shout no ball. And once or twice I put that to good effect, you know. Seen 1 or 2 people go a bit wild when it flashed past them. And it's always a good piece of advice. You used to laugh about it. Sometimes you're playing a benefit, you know, and you'd be bowling and somebody hit you for 4 kind of thing, you see. And there'd be applause. And then he'd go quiet and the old batsman would put his hand to his ear and listen. And he'd say, what's the matter? He'd say, I think that's an half-crown that dropped in bucket then. You know. And we used to, you see, when we played in away games, you would go and play in a benefit game and help one of your own mates out the side. I did it for 1 or 2 people, and I went and played in benefit man. And you see, if you got a couple of big names turned up as guest players, I know it sounds daft, but it might put another 300 or 400 people on the gate. And in those days, don't forget, if it was 10 shilling for a ticket and you put another 400 on the gate, you got another £200. That's a lot of money. I remember I once played in league cricket and I got 50 odd with the bat and 6 for 20 odd. And I think they'd paid me 60 odd pound for playing, or it might have been 75 pounds for playing. And I got 2 collections. And you used to get 2,000 or 3,000 in those days, you know, to league game. And I know I finished up close on about 190, 200 pounds, something like that. And my expenses in my pocket as well, which is cash. And I got home on the Saturday night and I was putting the money on the table and I was watching my mother and father looking at it. Because in those days, you see, I could have bought the house. Another 50 quid, I could have probably bought the row where I lived. And anyway, and the money was carefully put in a drawer. The drawer was locked. Back door was locked and front door was locked. And nobody went out of the house till Monday morning. And then it was practically like police escort down to catch the bus at Maltby to Doncaster to go to Yorkshire Penny Bank to put it in. You know, it was like it was like the old Pinkerton agency going down there. It was unbelievable. But you know, I think they're great pieces of life. They are great pieces of life as far as I'm concerned. I know they sound funny now, but in those days they were very, very serious, of course. And when you're in the game of cricket, you see, the era I played in, people didn't understand how the other half lived, if you know what I mean, because they didn't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work. A lot of them were at school till they were 24 or 5, educated half daft. They didn't understand. If you went to bed at night at 8:30, 9 o'clock, until you got into a routine, you'd be up at 5. By the time you got to the ground and started playing cricket at 11:30, you're ready for going back to bed. And that is something that you couldn't get through to them. It was a completely different lifestyle. Getting up at 8 in the morning and going to the office for 9:30, you know, where I come from, you'd been at work 4 hours then. Gradually, you got into the same routine, you know. You know, I'd be missing at night and people would say, oh, he'd be out somewhere, you know. But if I'd bowled 25, 30 overs, I was missing. I was upstairs on bed. And the batsmen used to go play golf on a Sunday, and they say, well, why don't you play golf? I'll say, well, because I've just bowled 130 overs this week, and you put your feet up and have a rest. I didn't start playing golf until I was turned 40. You know, lots of batsmen say, oh, I play off 3 or 4. Well, of course they did. They played there every week. I didn't. I was pounding up and down that wicket and fielding at short leg in places. It was a different thing altogether. Some captain and that realised that you wanted a rest, you know, but it seemed to be a foregone conclusion. We're playing at Oxford this weekend, yeah. We should be going for lunch and playing golf in there. Well, I'd never seen a golf club. I'd never seen a golf ball. When I was growing up, if somebody like me had got anywhere near a golf club, they'd say, get that kid out of here, the old colonel or the old doctor, wing commander or somebody, and they would have said, get that kid out. And that is why we lagged behind in golf for years and years. Oh, you know, fortunately, we didn't lack it in cricket because you were accepted into there. I have no regrets, basically. Well, I do have a regret that I didn't play 100 times for England, but apart from that, I know, I had a wonderful life. God was good to me, still is.
So you didn't play 100 times for England, which would have been, as you say, your only regret, really. What stopped you? I mean...
The cricket establishment had a big part in it. Don't forget that in 1954... when they went to Australia and left me at home, I do believe I was top of the England bowling averages with about 140 wickets. I mean, if you got 140 wickets a day, you'd probably get a peerage. And they didn't take me. They took Alec Bedser, who was way past his best. Took Peter Loader, Brian Statham, Frank Tyson, Trevor Bailey. Now, Alec did get 100 wickets that year, but I think he was the only other England bowler to do it. But I had about 140, 144 or something, and I think they then took 10 of those away from me and said it wasn't a first-class game. Frank Tyson didn't have 100, Brian Statham didn't have 100, neither did Peter Loader or Trevor Bailey. And they left me at home. And, I mean, it was said they'd left the best fast bowler in the country at home, kind of thing. And in fact, Frank Tyson, God bless him, when they asked him, he said, well, you know, we'd have been even stronger still if we brought the best fast bowler, Freddie Trueman. So I missed 54, 55, Australia, New Zealand. I played one game against South Africa in 55. I think I played a couple of games against Australia in 56. Now, you see, in 56, I think I got 9 wickets in 2 games. I think I got 7 at Lords and 2 at Leeds. The only reason I got 2 at Leeds is because it rained. Jim Lake and Tony Locke bowled them out. I got the first 2 wickets, 1 in each innings. I had a fellow called Colin MacDonald. I did him twice. And then I stood at short leg catching. And, well, I mean, if you got 9 wickets in 2 games playing for England a day, you know, you'd be for the rest of the season. And I got to Old Trafford, and they dropped me. And I said, you know, I get a bit fed up. I said, well, what am I dropped for now? Well, Brian Statham's fit. And I said, well, what's that got to do with it? They said, well, it's his home ground, so we thought we'd play him. And never picked me for the Oval. It was things like that used to happen. Another time, you see, Australia, Old Trafford. In the second innings, Richie Benno got 6 wickets against us, bowling round the wicket. They said into my footholes. Blame Fred again, you see. And only afterwards I said, well, thank you very much indeed. They dropped me for the Oval Test match, you see. And evidently the ball swung around at the Oval in that Test match, and there's nobody there to swing because I wasn't playing. 1 or 2 people said, yeah, we're doing well here, you know, where's Freddie? I was playing against Essex, getting 11 wickets. I do, in my own mind, honestly, Steve, I think I would have been the first man past 400. Make no mistake about it. You see, the nearest person to me, when I got my 300 net Test wicket, the nearest person to me would have been Brian Statham, and he was 50-odd wickets behind me. When how do you get your 300 Test wicket and don't get picked to go on tour? I mean, that's what I'm asking you. And, you know, one drunken selector said to me, he said, when I got my 300 Test wicket, well, I can tell you weren't going to South Africa, he said, but you might go now. I said, oh, thank you very much indeed. Very kind of you, you know. Drunk as a pig he was. And I do believe, and nobody will ever change my mind, that I would have been the first past 400. And nobody would have stopped me. And I do also believe in my own mind that I would possibly have done the Test treble. And that would have been 100 wickets, 100 catches and 1,000 runs. Because I was only just short of 1,000 runs with a bat anyway. Not like today, you know, where you get 2 innings every match. I mean, some matches I didn't get in at all because we had such fine players. And anyway, I was told I wasn't there to bat, I was there to bowl. But I've had a great life. I've had a wonderful time. You know, I mean, when you think about it, come from a little village called Stainton, Scotch Springs, down the bottom end of South Yorkshire on the Notts borders. When you think about it, I've been around the world 4 or 5 times. I'm not the richest man in the world, never will be, but I'm happy. I can have a glass of champagne now and again if I want one, or I can have a glass of decent claret if I want one. And I've still got a lot of friends in the game. You know, it's great when the old cricketers get together and they laugh. You know, they eat every half volley for 4, never drop a catch. Every ball pitches leg and middle and miss the off. It's absolutely marvellous when you sat talking about it. And a lot of these modern players don't understand that, but they will when they get older, you know. And that is when they'll realise that, yes, and they will think the same way. Well, they're not as good a players as we were. We're probably not as good a players as the players before us. But we had a lot of fun. But laugh, I don't know. I still laugh to this day about different things we saw. They tell a lovely story, you know, about Brian Statham playing in India. All of a sudden the crowd start laughing and there's a bit of disturbance and all that, and the monkey came on the ground. And this monkey came on the ground and the umpire said, you know, everybody stand still because the monkey won't hurt you and all this business. And it's messing around, the game's stopped, it's on the wicket and all that. And eventually it loped up and pulled a stump out of the ground. Of course, the crowd were all falling about laughing. And this is how the story evidently goes. And Brian, who's not the bravest man in the world, he stood just behind square or just in front of square when the monkey made a lunge at him and swung the stump, and they reckon Brian took off across the field with the monkey behind him with the stump chasing him all the way to the pavilion. And he shot up the pavilion steps and the monkey went up the stand, took the stump with him. I wish we could have seen that on film. It would have been marvellous. Absolutely wonderful. Tom Graveney told the story better than me because he was there. You know, it is unbelievable that could happen. And evidently the monkey was resident in the stadium. And people knew about it. And I wish I'd been there to see that, because I would just lie on the floor, mate, with my sense of humour. I've got a wicked sense of humour. But I would have just loved to have seen it. It must have been very funny.
Who was the funniest character you met in the game, or have met in the game, or played with in the game?
Brian Johnson was one of the funniest. I mean, Brian, God bless him, I loved him to death. I think he would much rather have been a comedian than a commentator. He would love to have been a first-class cricketer, behind the timbers, as he used to say, you know. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man. I used to love working with him. We'd gel together. But, I mean, some of his statements were outrageous on radio, and people just fell about laughing. And I tell them sometimes about, you know, and railing with the England captain, he's just relieved himself at the pavilion end. Well, everybody used to fall about laughing. And, I mean, if I'd said that, or somebody else round the world that had been letters flying, you know, get that uncouth person Trueman off the radio and all. But they just laughed at him, you know, and Basil D'Oliveira was caught out behind the wicket having a splash outside the off stump. Well, I mean, we used to fall about laughing, you know. And of course, people out there, they thought it was so funny. There's Colin Cowdery at leg slip, feet apart, waiting for a tickle. And this used to go on, you know.
But you're right, if it had been you, you'd have been hung, drawn and quartered.
Oh, been thrown off the radio, thrown out. No. But of course it was Brian, and he had that sort of way. He was a wonderful man. I had a great time in those days in the commentary box with the different characters, you see. There was Brian Johnson, Don Mosey, who was commanded the English language, was unbelievable. And of course the other style of John Arlott. And I worked with those three wonderful, wonderful people. And, of course, coming over from Australia, Alan McGilvray, another very highly recognised, respected commentator. And I had the great pleasure of working with those sort of people. Harry Seacombe, he was another one, God bless him. He was a great pal of mine. When I got my 300 Test wicket, you know, he had me on stage. He was playing Mr. Pickwick, I think it was. And he presented me with a tape recorder. They had me on the stage that night. It was a Saturday, you see. The Black and White Minstrels, my great dear late friend Leslie Crowther. They had me on the stage of the Victoria Palace. They had me on that night with the ball and presented me with a magnum of champagne from Black and White Minstrel show, which was tremendous. It caused a big stir when I did that. It was a lot of fun, I tell you. But I still think that, you know, somebody could have got the ball and it mounted and presented to me, because it was a very historical moment. And as Harvey Smith said, you know, if it had been from the south of England, he'd have been knighted for it. So, I've not done bad, Steve.
Yeah.
I've had a great time.
Now, be honest, Fred. You're known as Fiery Fred, the Maltby Mauler. The nicknames go on and on. Have you ever played up to it?
No.
Never?
I can't understand. I could never understand Fiery Fred, basically. I think it was something that fitted like Typhoon Tyson. Man, he was like a typhoon. He was quick. Quickest bowler I've ever seen. For 2 years before he broke the fib and tip of the left leg. Oh, he was quick. Make no mistake about it.
Your career at Yorkshire ended eventually, didn't it? It was a period really where you had to make the decision yourself, didn't you? You got to the stage where you thought, well...
Well, no, not really. I could have played another 2 seasons. I was only 37.
Did you feel they didn't want you anymore?
Well, no. It was I was 37 and I asked for another benefit. I think after, more wickets than any fast bowler in the history of the game, that I thought I might get another benefit. I was more or less told I didn't think I'd done enough for the club. So I thought, well, that's it. And then the newspaper came along and wanted me to go full-time, offered me the correspondence job, so I took it. And my wages doubled overnight, and then I started making personal appearances and things and all that. So that was one of the reasons I left, actually, because I asked for a second benefit and I didn't get it. And I still think it's owed me. And I wouldn't mind having it now. I mean, in those days, you might have made about 11,000 quid. You might make 200 now. Yeah.
The story goes, when you had your resignation letter, you went along and saw the chairman.
I went to see the president
first. Didn't you get an offer that you thought, oh, crikey, I wish I hadn't put it in my paper column the next day?
No, well, that's true, yeah. No, what happened was I went to see Sir William Worsley, who was the president and an absolute gentleman. And he couldn't understand why I was there on the Saturday night, you see. And I did it after 6 o'clock, so nobody could ring the paper and say, Freddie's retired. And he said, oh, come in. And I said, oh, it's just a letter for you, sir. And I'm retiring, my resignation. And he said, no, sit down. And what happened was they were going to make me captain of Yorkshire the following year, which I didn't know. And I think it had already been decided that they were going to take it off Brian Close, which I didn't agree with. It would have been nice to have captained my county for a season, had my name on the honours board, because that's the only way they remember me there. There's nothing there to say I played for Yorkshire. So William said to me, he said, can you stop the publication? And I said, well, no, it's too late now, kind of thing. And so I would have liked to have played another 2 seasons, but it didn't happen, and that's the way it was, and I finished. And then I drove through to Bingley and see the chairman, Brian Sellers. He didn't want me to finish, so I think it was a bit of a shock to a lot of people. So I drove over to Hovingham, back to Bingley, trying to do the right and correct thing. I could have just announced it in the paper next day, and I finished, but I didn't. I went and saw both the president and the chairman of the club. So that's what I did.
Would you like to play today?
Good question. I suppose yes, I would, because I always wanted to play cricket. But would I have enjoyed it as much? I don't think so. I don't think I would have enjoyed cricket today like I enjoyed when I played. When I look back at some of the wickets I bowled on and what I did, and I see some of the tips that we are playing cricket on today, and that's not only my thinking, that is quite a lot of people. I mean, when you played at Headingley, Trent Bridge, Birmingham, the Oval, I mean, they were magnificent batting wickets. Because don't forget, it's a batsman. Cricket is a batsman's game. Bowlers are only labourers, as they say, strong it back and weak it head. It's a batsman's game, and it was. I mean, you look at Headingley today, to the Headingley I played on, don't forget, 3 triple test centuries on that wicket, 2 by Don Bradman and 1 by John Edrich. Numerous double hundreds. Think of Eric Rowan in 1951. I think he made about 270, 269 or something against England. Patowdy, I think, made a double hundred. Geoffrey Boycott made a double hundred. Different people, made double hundreds there.
You've been outspoken throughout your career, not just while you were playing, since you've been playing as well. You've got strong views on pretty much everything, cricket and outside cricket. How many people do you reckon you have upset?
If being straightforward and telling the truth is a crime, then okay, I'm guilty. It's as easy as that. People come to you and say, you don't like me. I say, you're right, bugger off. Don't bother me. And I mean it. Why waste time talking to somebody if you don't want to know them? Why waste your breath? You seem to be living in an era nowadays which I wouldn't want to be a top-class sportsman in, because it seems to me that a lot of people would rather write and talk about misdemeanour than talking about the actual professional game itself. And you can tell that because all the cricketing stories, 99 and 2/3%, are all yesteryear. They're not today. Because I think people are frightened to say something or do something in case it's going to be all over the front page of a newspaper. So when I played, it wasn't like that. Most of the press guys in those days were cricket-loving writers and fanatics, and they loved the game of cricket. And it'll change even more as we go through the 21st century. But fortunately, I shan't be able to see it.
And when you have gone, what do you think they'll put on your gravestone?
Well, I shall have it put on the gravestone when I die, and I shall say, no, it wasn't Fred because he's here. That'll be my epitaph. And they'll not be able to blame it, because I guarantee you now, 12 months after I have died, somebody will see me.
And where do you think you'll end up? Up top or down below?
Well, it doesn't matter which way I go. I shall have friends in both places.
Fred Trueman, thank you.
It's a pleasure, Steve. Lovely to talk to you.